Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of Sylvania City Council for January 6, 2025 to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Hanson?
Here.
Mr. Hanem?
Here.
Mr. McCann?
Here.
Mr. Richardson?
Here.
Ms. Stowe is excused. Mrs. Westfall?
Here.
5 members of City Council are present, therefore a quorum does exist. We'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance, again led by Mr. Hanson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up on the agenda is my ceremonial swearing in as mayor. If Judge Bonfiglio would come forward.
All right. Mr. Fry, would you raise your right hand and repeat after me? I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
in the presence of Almighty God
in the presence of Almighty God
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Charter of the City of Sylvania,
and the Charter of the City of Sylvania,
and I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the public office
the duties of the public office
of Mayor of the City of Sylvania.
of Mayor of the City of Sylvania.
Congratulations.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening, my family. Hi, Mom. She's online somewhere watching. So thank you very much for that. I've got a lot of friends in the audience, obviously, as well. And it's been a long time here. I've heard on a number of occasions, Mayor Stowe, have 29 years here. I've got big shoes to fill, and that's absolutely true. The good news about that is that I've got an amazing staff, and quite frankly, I obviously knew the senior staff pretty well, but as I'm getting to know the next level down, the managerial people, very impressed with the capabilities and skills of those individuals as well. Not surprised by that, but still gratifying to see that we have some amazingly talented individuals in our city, and I'm looking forward to working with all of them. I also have a lot of wisdom up here on City Council that I can continue to rely on my former City Council members. I look forward to continuing to work with them in a slightly different pathway. I've got other people here in the audience, former member of council who's a good friend, Mark Lukey and others. I appreciate all of that. So with that being said, this is still about getting the people's work done. And we have a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of stuff on the agenda for this evening and a lot of wonderful projects that are going forward in our city that are going to be starting this evening. So with that being said, it's time to go back to do the people's work. That's what they deserve. That's what we're here for. And I appreciate all of you coming this evening. You're welcome to stay for the whole thing, but you don't have to. That's completely up to you. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And we also asked the town crier, Mike Lever, to perform his duties as town crier.
Oh yay! Oh yay! Oh yay! Sylvania City Council, citizens of Sylvania, and visitors from near and far hearing this message of great importance. It is my pleasure and honor to present to you your new mayor, the Honorable Mark R. Fry, a resident for over 20 years, has been served on council for 10 years. Mark's philosophy has been being prepared for the next thing and being ready to figure out whatever the need is to be done. God protect, promote prosperity of the municipality and area of Sylvania, Ohio.
Now, time for our the rest of our meeting. Give people a moment to exit.
Judge, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Appreciate it. So I have a few things to add for the agenda this evening. We have the results of the special council meeting at 7 p.m. this evening, which I'll add as agenda number 5A. Just an announcement in that regard, not that it's going to be a shock to anybody on council. Agenda item 7A, which is ordinance number 11, 2025 for consideration, and then a resolution for the Employee and Community Relations Committee meeting, which we will add as agenda item 20B. Mrs. Westfall, anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to add a time to schedule some committee of the whole meetings for discussion and interviews for the vacant council seat.
Okay, let's make that 21A.
Thank you.
Anything else you would like to add?
Thank you.
Other members of council? Hearing Mr. Sanford,
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Chief Miller,
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Shaw,
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Schroyer,
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Brining.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the council agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. On to agenda item 5A, the results of the special council meeting. No real report necessary. There'll be minutes that will be distributed for consideration at the next meeting. But as we all know, Mrs. Westfall sitting up here as president of council. The results of this council meeting at 7 was that Mrs. Westfall was officially appointed as the new president of council. So congratulations
Thank you.
on your new role. We appreciate you being willing to serve in that role. Thank you so much. I look forward to continuing to work with you in that regard. Moving on, we've got the consideration of the council meeting minutes for December 16, 2024. Mrs. Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move approval for the city council meeting minutes for the meeting held December 16th, 2024 as submitted.
Second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to the public hearing. Report on the public hearing for ZA 2024, which was held earlier this evening. Mrs. Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we did have a public hearing this evening at 7:15, and present were council members Mr. Hanem, Mr. Hanson, Mr. Richardson, Mr. McCann, and myself. Many members of administration were present as well, and we did have some guests in the room. The primary focus of this meeting was to get public comment on the proposed zoning ordinance amendment application ZA-2-2024, which is a zoning request change for Centennial Crossing Plat 1, Lot BB and Lot GG. And the plan was to put 7-unit townhomes in both of those locations, changing a portion of the planned development from a commercial to a residential zoning. We did not have anybody who spoke in favor or in opposition to this, but we did have a few community questions, and we did have one particular member of the community who brought an issue of concern that we'll follow up on as well. So with that, Mr. Hanem moved that we advance legislation supporting this the zoning amendment to 2024, and Mr. Hanson seconded. The meeting adjourned at 7:21.
Thank you.
And with that, may I introduce the legislation?
Please.
We have legislation with us this evening. Ordinance number 11-2025. All members of council have already received a copy of legislation. The legislation reads, approving the recommendation of the Municipal Planning Commission to approve petition for zoning ordinance amendment number ZA-2-2024 and the petition of Mike Hojanaki to change the zoning of 8233 Sunset Lane and 5750 Breezy Porch Drive, Sylvania, Ohio. I move passage of ordinance number 11-2025 as an emergency measure.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 11, 2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. With so many things on the agenda and typically we always do the chair of the committees. I'm moving stuff around a little bit, so I may catch you flat-footed. Don't be shocked if I call on you because there's a lot of things on the agenda this evening. And everybody will have a chance to read at least a couple of these. With that, we have ordinance number 1-2025, talking about the collective bargaining agreement. Mr. Schroyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ordinance 1-2025 represents the 3-year collective bargaining agreement with our public service workers, which includes streets, parks, water, and sewer. Among some minor operational and financial adjustments, it calls for a 4% pay increase for each year of the next 3 years. It has been voted on and approved by the members, and we ask for your approval tonight. Do you have any questions?
Is there any questions for Mr. Schroyer? Hearing none, Mrs. Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce ordinance number 1-2025 and read by title only, authorizing the mayor and director of finance to enter into a 3-year collective bargaining agreement effective January 1st, 2025, on behalf of the City of Sylvania Municipal Employees Association, affiliated with District 8, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFL-CIO. I move final passage of ordinance number 1-2025 as an emergency measure.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1-2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 9, proposed ordinance number 2-2025. Mr. Schroyer.
Thank you. This ordinance is for all non-union employees of the city. We do non-union 1 year at a time, so it's a 1-year ordinance. It represents, for most employees, it represents a 4% increase, just as the union was approved, with some exceptions to some positions due to market rate studies that we performed. We made some adjustments to certain positions.
Thank you, Mr. Schroyer. Any questions?
Mr. Schroyer, can you expand on the market study?
Sure. We analyzed all the local communities, the city of Perrysburg, city of Maumee, city of Oregon, and Sylvania Township. We did a study of all the positions at those places. Looked at an average of all those four. Not the township doesn't have all positions, but an average of those positions. And then we looked at what we were paying here at the city for those positions and then adjusted accordingly.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Schroyer?
It's important to note that these adjustments are to remain competitive so that we can keep good people we have and continue. And when we go out in the market to look for folks that we are paying, people don't have to sacrifice to come to work for us.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention, we also, the city of Perrysburg did a very comprehensive study and it was nice enough to share that with us that Mr. Schroyer also utilized as part of the study, and that was very helpful. And so to the city of Perrysburg, thank you for that information. That was, because it was 24 communities, something like that. So it was pretty broad-based. Yeah. Any other questions for Mr. Schroyer?
And just so everybody knows, for both of these ordinances that we're talking about here, we will not have to adjust the budget that was passed in November for those, or December for those.
Any other questions? Ordinance number 2, 2025, Mrs. Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce ordinance number 2-2025 and read by title only. Making certain position and compensation pay plan changes, making certain salary, wage, and other service compensation adjustments to the codified ordinances of Sylvania 1979 as amended, and other ordinances by granting pay increases to the appointed officials whose titles are listed in section 139.03E3, by granting 4% pay increase to all non-union city employees and court employees whose positions are included in the list of occupational titles of section 139.02A of the codified ordinances of Sylvania, which increase is reflected in the annual wage rate schedule 4 of section 139.10D of the Sylvania codified ordinances by granting pay increases for some of the employees in the labor and trades supervision group. I move passage of ordinance number 2-2025 as an emergency measure.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 2, 2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. The last thing, I think, now we have another couple more for Mr. Schroyer. Consideration on number 10, which is ordinance number 3, 2025. Mr. Schroyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an agreement between Donald J. Schoenhart and Associates and the city. What they do is they take our cash basis financial statements at the end of the year and they convert them to an accrual GAAP basis, which is then audited by the state auditors or the representatives for the state auditors. They've been doing this for more years. I've been here 12 years. They do it for many years, even before that. We're coming off a 3-year agreement with them, which was called for an annual payment of $15,000 a year. And the new 3-year agreement is at no additional cost, $15,000 a year for each year.
Good news.
Yeah.
It's always good when services aren't going up in costs. It's rare these days.
And they do a fantastic job.
Any questions for Mr. Schroyer regarding ordinance number 3? Hearing none, Mr. Hanem, I'm going to throw this one to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move adoption of ordinance number 3-2025, and I will read by title only, authorizing an agreement between Donald J. Schoenhart and Associates and the city of Sylvania, whereby said firm will assist the city in preparation of its 2024, 2025, and 2026 basic financial statements, BFSs, in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, at costs not to exceed $15,000 for 2024, $15,000 for 2025, and $15,000 for 2026, plus mileage for each year, authorizing the mayor and director of finance to sign the agreement on behalf of the city. And I move adoption of ordinance number 3-2025 as an emergency measure.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 3, 2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried, and ordinance number 3, 2025 is adopted as an emergency measure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Toby.
Moving on to ordinance number 4, 2025. Ms. Brining, is this one yours or is this Mr. Schroyer's?
Sure, I can take this one, Mr. Mayor, thank
Thank
you. The judge and the magistrate reached out last week. This is similar to the agreement that the city previously entered into with the Attorney General's office for the collection of unpaid income tax. They are interested in entering into an agreement with them for the collection of criminal and civil court costs, and have asked, because it's the city, we have to be the ones to enter into the agreement, so they've requested that the city council approve this legislation.
Questions for Ms. Browning? And the judge and magistrate are both comfortable with the language?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Browning on ordinance number 4, 2025? Hearing none, Mr. Hanem, you're up again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move adoption of ordinance number 4-2025. I will read by title only, authorizing the mayor and director of finance to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Attorney General for the collection of unpaid court costs. And I move adoption of ordinance number 4-2025 as an emergency measure.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve ordinance number 4, 2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carried and ordinance number 4, 2025 is passed as an emergency measure. On to agenda item number 12, which is ordinance number 5, 2025. I'm not sure, this is probably you, Mr. Sanford, or Brian, which one of you would like to take this?
I can start giving that and ask Leslie to fill in one piece, because we brought this forward. Again, it's the purchase of 3 properties on Summit Street by the city. We had the properties appraised, and the appraisal value was $200,000. That was the offer then made to Carol Quinnell, who's the owner of the properties. This is the 5716. There's a structure on that, and on either side of 5710 and 5720 are empty lots. And so we come back, and I think there was a question when we first brought it to inspect the property, make sure there was not any contamination on the property, and Leslie handled that part and found out, and we got a report back that there was not.
That's correct. Yep, there were no environmental concerns or issues. It's been used as residential use for as long as they were able to go back and find the records. So, and I forwarded it to Mr. Hanem as well, and he had a chance to review it, and no issues. So,
Free environmental lawyer.
which I appreciate.
So based on that information, we wanted to move this forward tonight and have it approved so we can move forward with the purchase.
Just to give you some context to members of council and actually the general public, these properties back up to the North Fork of the 10 Mile Creek.
North Branch.
And you'll recall a few years ago, we had a pretty significant study done on the downtown footprint. These properties were part of that puzzle, and it gives us a position where we can utilize this, for further development purposes if we get somebody that approaches us for the potential acquisition of additional property for a larger project. So it's a nice first step in that process. So, any questions for Mr. Sanford or Ms. Brining? Hearing none, we have ordinance number 5, 2025. And since Ms. Stowe isn't here, Mr. Hanson, if you will do this since you're on buildings in your office.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce by title only ordinance number 5-2025, authorizing the mayor and director of finance to enter into an offer to purchase and First Amendment to offer to purchase for the property located at 5710, 5716, and 5720 Summit Street, Sylvania, Lucas County, Ohio. That should be 43560.
Sorry.
Owned by Quinnell Investments LTD and Ohio Limited Liability Company for the amount of $200,000. Providing funds for said purchase, authorizing the payment of the purchase price. I move for passage of ordinance number 5-2025 as an emergency measure.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 5, 2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carried. And ordinance number 5, 2025 is passed as an emergency measure. Thank you very much. Now we're up to Mr. Shaw's portion of the agenda. Mr. Shaw, take us through number 13 on our agenda for this evening. This is a long time coming, and an awful large chunk of money for the city.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the introduction. This is I can easily say the largest construction project we will undertake, at least in my time, maybe ever, but been working on US 23 Monroe, at least for me, since 2015, so I'm in year 10 in bringing this project to fruition. So we are here. Plans are complete. The engineering consultant, Arcadis, has finished the plans. We're ready to move the project into the bidding phase. So we have several documents that ODOT is asking us to participate in with them. The law director has structured the ordinance so that they're in chronological order to comply with section 5705.41 and chapter 5521 of the revised code. So they are in specific order for a reason. Those instruments are, let me get to them. We have in section 1, the director of finance is authorized to sign for the amount that's due, which is the fiscal officer's certificate. That amount is $6,189,185. As a reminder to you, that breaks down into $5.4 million in our capital improvement account, $733,000 in our water account, which is the 701, and then about $21,000 in our sanitary sewer account, which is 702. To be a reminder, there will be a further reduction off of the capital improvement account in the amount of $1 million. That is an OPWC grant that we will use as the project is constructed that will further reduce our burden in the capital improvement account. So that's section 1. Section 2, we have a contract that we'll enter into with ODOT. Pretty standard, usually the similar contracts that we see that discuss the amount, who's responsible, and that be. Section 3 is a little bit different on some of their projects, but they have offered to us an escrow agreement because of the large amount of money that is going into this. If we did not use an escrow account, ODOT would hold on to those funds until project completion, which right now is scheduled for 26. So rather than if the bids come in lower, and them hold on to our funds for a couple of years, they're giving us the flexibility to only take what's necessary at the time of the bid and then release the rest of those funds back to us, which is great. And then the last thing is approval of the invoice, which is section 4 in the ordinance as well, which is the amount that I read there. So that's the complete package in front of you. ODOT is scheduled to move the project to sale here very shortly. They'll open bids on February 13th, and we will see where we sit at that time. So that's a big overview of what's here. There's a lot embedded in here. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor.
You'll all recall that we've been working diligently for years on this, recognizing the size and scope of the project. Mr. Aller and Mr. Shaw now have been very successful in securing grants and funds of all sorts and shapes and types in order to minimize the cost to the city on this very large project. Just for a refresh, Mr. Shaw, what's the total anticipated cost of this project?
Construction cost right now is about $27.5 million.
So very substantial cost to us, and appreciate the administration's efforts in that regard. Council members, do you have any questions for Mr. Shaw in this regard?
I have a quick question,
Mrs.
Mr.
Wesson.
Shaw. I see that we have $6 million plus from the city. You just mentioned that the full project is $27 million. Do we expect additional costs coming in phases that the city will be accountable for, or will the state really manage the rest of the funding of the project?
So that's a good question. So what happens is we'll open bids in February. In the event that bids come in over estimate, I will probably be back in front of you in February with whatever additional request that would be. So that would be an additional appropriation. I should mention everything in front of you so far was budgeted and approved in the 2025 capital improvement budget. That could be a reality. That could be the case, and I might be in front of you in February if that's the case. If everything goes good in February and the project comes in under estimate, we're good and we're set sailing. We make our payment to ODOT. Any funds that's left over, we get back in escrow. The project goes all the way through construction. Obviously, there's change orders in a $27.5 million project. Depending on how those shake out, we make those final adjustments almost a year or two even after the project is completed. So we will have a very good picture of how construction stands in 27, 28, and if there are any additional funds as a result of change orders, we can appropriately, approve our capital improvement budget to be planned for those.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Shaw?
I have another quick question. I know we've talked about it a million times, and I think I read it in here, but it's not coming to mind right now. What is the timeline on this, when it will start, when you project completion?
Yeah, there's schedule managers called Ellis, and it lists April 1st as a possible construction time, so I would say spring start. The community will see not much impact to our mainline traveled roads. All ramps stay open. You'll see a lot of work in the infield, building our new ramps, building earthwork up, 2 brand new bridges for the off ramp as well as the on ramp. May even get started on some Monroe Street widening to the south for the bridge, but a lot of that can be done without affecting traffic. All of that's in 25. Flip the calendar in 26. March-ish of 26 is when the bridge will close for 5 months. We bookended that with the start of the Sylvania school season in mid-August. Rewind the clock back about 5 months, and that's how we established our closure date for the bridge. Hopefully all said and done by October of 26.
And so the decision has been made to completely close that bridge for that 5-month period so that it will be a more rapid progress on the completion of the project.
Absolutely. If we looked at this almost 5 or 6 years ago on the duration of time it would take to do part width construction or full closure. We're doing this in about 5 months. If we were doing part width, 1 lane in each direction, about 18 months. So at the time, we had made that choice to close the bridge.
And are we talking with the townships that they know that they may be getting more traffic through there and through other locations as traffic reroutes up to Stearns and south of here?
Yes, absolutely. We've been in coordination with all of them as well as our emergency officials. We talked with Chief of Police on how to stage both sides of the interchange. We've talked with schools on how we do that. Sylvania Township Fire as well, how they stage emergencies on both sides. So a lot of coordination for the last few years on this.
One question, Mr. Shaw. It was my understanding a year ago that there might be a conflict in schedule for Stearns construction. Is that still the case?
We did some double checking on that earlier this year. Mr. Fry, Council President Fry at the time, Mayor Fry now, had asked that very question as well. So we did some coordination just to double check and make sure nothing was planned on MDOT's end. They do not have anything planned in the schedule, so we are good.
Thank you.
That would have been a problem.
Would have been a problem.
Or a bigger problem. So shut it down, take our medicine for a little lesser period of time.
Yeah.
Rather than go on.
Doesn't get as more invasive of a project as this, but I'm thrilled to see what this is going to be like when we're done. This is, this interchange has had problems for a very long time. ODOT has recognized this interchange has had a problem for a very long time. To be able to pull all the resources together that we have to do this and finally have it come to fruition, I'm just thrilled with. I can't wait to see what it's like in 26.
That's the reason we were able to get $20-some million for the project. Any other questions for Mr. Shaw? Hearing none, ordinance number 6, 2025, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is ordinance number 6, 2025. I'll read by title only. Authorizing the mayor and director of finance of the city of Sylvania, Ohio, to enter into a contract with the state of Ohio Department of Transportation for the US 23 SR 51 Monroe Street Interchange Improvement Project and SR 51 Monroe Street from the termini of the interchange project to Whiteford Road Resurfacing Project, appropriating funds for said improvements in the amount of $6,189,195. I move passage as an emergency measure.
Second. Motion and a second to approve ordinance number 6, 2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carried. Thank you very much. Ordinance number 6, 2025 is approved as an emergency measure. Mr. Shaw, up to item number 14.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brent Road and Haroon Road, this is the last piece of a traffic calming study that we had done on Haroon Road dating back to 2019. With that study, if you recall, we looked at the Sylvania River Trail crossing there, where we've now installed a pedestrian hybrid beacon. That was project 1. Project 2 is a traffic signal at Flower Hospital, which moves to construction in May of this year. And this is the final piece of the traffic calming study, which is the southern end of the study area, which is at Brent Road and Haroon Road. We applied for congestion mitigation and air quality funds at Temacog to install a roundabout at the intersection, and we're successful with that application. We have about $1 million from CMAQ funds for that. So we are ready to move forward. The project has now advanced into the start of the actual design phase. It takes about 1.5 years, almost 2 years to complete a design like this. So we requested letters of interest from qualified consultants to provide engineering services. And we received 3 letters of interest. We reviewed, scored, and ranked those letters of interest and are selecting DGL Consulting Engineers as the most highly qualified consultant for this project. DGL was the author of the traffic calming study back in 2019. They did the traffic signal for us at Haroon and Flower. This is the final piece of it too to help us with this effort. So intimate knowledge of everything that goes into this particular project at this intersection. So they have provided us with a proposal in the amount of $231,608 to complete the design of the roundabout. They have 1 geotechnical engineering sub-consultant, CTL engineering, that's listed in the project too. This project will require us to purchase right-of-way to do. We will be back at a later council meeting once those limits are known and how many parcels would be. This is a pretty similar process we've done on other LPA projects where we've come back with just a right-of-way piece to help us with that, but that's not included here. So I would request approval. This was a 2025 capital improvement budgeted item out of our 401 account that's listed there. So Mayor Fry, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council members have questions.
Yes, Mr. Fry, Mr. Mayor?
It's okay. It's new to me too.
Mr. Shaw, just looking at timing of all the projects, with US 23 and downtown, I believe this would take place in 2027? 28. Okay, good news. Thank you.
There's a lot of moving pieces to organize, you're right. There's a lot, all of our intersections.
You're a juggler. Mrs. Westfall.
I would like to inquire whether the neighbors in the area are aware that a roundabout is being considered there.
Yes, we actually have spoken quite a bit with the church on the east side, the St. Elias. They actually were pretty integral in the funding application process because we were working pretty extensively with them on how they wanted. One of their drives is kind of in conflict with where the roundabout would go. We kind of went through several iterations of what it could like and what we should do, had several meetings. So they're very aware of it. I would say the residential areas to the north, probably not so much as yet, but we will certainly be engaging them.
Other questions for Mr. Shaw? One thing that I spoke to Mr. Shaw about at the staff meeting last week was potentially getting together and having I don't know what would be a streets committee meeting or committee of the whole, but probably streets. Mr. Richardson Mr. Hanson, you'd mentioned a while back about we're doing a lot of roundabouts. People are somewhat comfortable. We've had lots of information about the roundabout or the double roundabout at Erie and Monroe and other things in this. But we're still looking at some more before we're all said and done with all these different projects over the next 5 years or so. It might be helpful if council was interested to have Mr. Shaw put together and spend a few extra minutes beyond just an ordinance for consideration to talk about the benefits of the roundabout and strengths and the drawbacks. So because it's a great thing to have a roundabout, but there are places where it doesn't fit. So would council be interested in having something like that?
I think that's a good idea.
Maybe prior to a council meeting, and then half an hour, 40 minutes, having Mr. Shaw walk us through some of that. Mr. Rich, is you okay with that?
Very happy to host that, yeah.
Okay, maybe we can set that up at next council meeting?
Sure.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Mr. Shaw? If not, we have ordinance number 7, 2025 for consideration. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is ordinance number 7, 2025. I'll read by title only. Accepting the proposal of DGL Consulting Engineers LLC to provide professional engineering services for the Brent and Haroon Roundabout project, appropriating funds therefore in the amount of $231,608. I move passage as an emergency measure.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 7, 2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. And ordinance number 7, 2025 is passed as an emergency measure. Onward to item number 15, ordinance number 8, 2025. Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The downtown transportation improvement project will get started this year. So we have two just monster projects, both of really big significant and importance to our Sylvania community. So really excited for both of these. We've worked really hard at all of them, but we've sold the first phase, which is the first block, Monroe to Maplewood. Helms & Sons has been the awarded contractor with them. We have a pre-construction meeting scheduled with them on January 15th to understand more about timing and when and where and everything. So we'll have a much better picture of how that's going to come to fruition as we come into this year. But we also need construction management services to help us out with this project. Almost $4 million, a little over $4 million of downtown improvements. We need to have watchful eye for that. We did a letter of interest process for this too, for construction management services. For this particular project, we only received one letter of interest. That is from American Structure Point. They should be familiar to you guys. They've done a lot of our large projects that mostly have federal money or ODOT monies in them. They're very good at understanding the entire ODOT process and all of the paperwork that goes with it. They're well equipped to do this project in our downtown footprint as well. So I would be excited to have them help us with this effort. They prepared a proposal in the amount of $427,120 to help us with construction management services here. Done a lot of LPA work. Those projects are listed in the letter in your packet. This again was a 2025 budgeted item out of our 401 account. So I would recommend approval of our proposal with American Structure Point to help us with construction services. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Shaw?
Again, I'm sure that it was in here when I read through it, but I'm not recalling right now the timing on this. And if you said it, I wasn't listening carefully enough.
We'll know a lot more next week, but what we're hearing is that they would like to get started early on water and sewer work especially. Those are good items that we can do during winter months and accomplish things that move the schedule up a little bit. So as early as February, maybe on some water line work. If the weather's really horrible, obviously not, but they're anxious to get going on some of the water and sewer work. And if we have, I've told everybody before that asked me, if we've had a great project and things have gone well, we're in August finish. If things are probably on schedule, maybe a September finish, and if things didn't go good in a downtown footprint, we're probably in like an October finish. So crossing our fingers we get to an August thing, but working in downtown footprints, in my experience, is really challenging. You run into all kinds of things you had no idea were there. So we hope not to run into too many of those.
So the 150 years of stuff, right?
A lot, yeah.
Tell what you're gonna find.
That's right.
Mr. Shaw, remind us of the traffic pattern during this.
Sure. When they do the water and sewer work that I was mentioning, we should be able to keep both lanes going in both directions for as long as we can. The new water main is going to be on the east side of the road, so we should be able to maintain it as long as we can. Once that work is finished and we need to get down to actually tearing out the old infrastructure in that first block, it'll move to just a one-way traffic pattern in the northbound direction. So if you're coming from US 23, you want to get to our downtown, you'll be able to always come north and get to your places and then find your places to park from there. And then once we do one side of the road, we switch it to the other. We just move that one northbound lane back and forth.
As we did near or between or up to a ravine.
Exactly. Exact same traffic pattern.
And how do you anticipate this impacting events and things like that?
That's obviously tough, right? We do a lot in our downtown footprint. So we've been coordinating a lot with Redbird and the Arts Commission, everybody else downtown about, obviously off-limits footprint for this construction season. I gave you optimistic looks and some bad looks at timing on that, but, we've been communicating with them for a couple years now that this is coming. So most of them are aware.
Importantly, CIC provided a grant to the regional chamber, Sylvania Chamber, to provide information and advertising for the downtown businesses, so that people know that, yes, those businesses are still there, yes, those businesses are open, and yes, you can get to them, with a handful of exceptions for a few hours while we're doing construction, correct?
Right, exactly. If you look at the city of Maumee, a lot of talk about their downtown and whether you like how they've narrowed lanes and what have you. At the end of the day, the contractor did a really good job with the businesses. They had good signage up. They tried to work in groups or in blocks so that you weren't taking long vasts of areas out at a time. We've talked about that with our contractor already to keep work zones short and, get your work done. So we're anticipating this is the same contractor that did Maumee, so they have experience working in downtown footprints. They should have a real leg up here on how to accomplish a successful project.
Other questions for Mr. Shaw?
Mr. Mayor, I think Bill,
Mr. Sanford?
just to add, Joe, tell us about the couple of groups you're going to be speaking at in the coming months.
Sure. For the US 23 project as well as this, I'm scheduled to be at Rotary, I'm scheduled to be at Sylvania CIC. Am I missing one? Chamber, I'm scheduled to be at the Chamber, so I'm doing a tour, so to speak, in February and March, trying to get the word out just as much as we can. And the good part about it is I'll have as much information as I can from all of my contractors at that time. I can provide the best information to those groups at that meeting, but just doing the best to try to get the word out at those functions.
Other questions for Mr. Shaw? Hearing none, we have ordinance number 8, 2025 for consideration. Mr. McCann, let's do this one to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce by title only ordinance number 8-2025, accepting the proposal of American Structure Point, Inc. to provide construction management services for the downtown transportation improvements Phase 1 project, appropriating funds therefore in the amount of not to exceed $427,120. I move for passage of ordinance number 8-2025 as an emergency measure.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 8, 2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried, and ordinance number 8, 2025 is approved as an emergency measure. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 16, Haroon Road and Ravine Drive. Seems like we've been hearing about this one for quite some time too, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we've been working on this one for a couple years now, closely with our partners at Flower Hospital. This is a big impact to them, and we've been working with them step for step along the way. But if you've been through the Haroon and Ravine intersection, you've seen a little bit of work over there. Traffic signal foundations are in. They were actually doing some test bores just to make sure we didn't have any underground conflicts with our signal supports that are going to be going in at the new intersection. We didn't run into any, so they went in and put the foundations in. So we've already started a little bit of construction work. Big pause here until we get to May 2025, and that's when the project will pick up full steam. We'll have all of our traffic signal equipment in, all of our signal supports. The contractor can mobilize quickly, do their work, and get out as quickly as they can next to a hospital zone. So that's been the key all along here. So we started construction. Again, we need a construction management firm that's well-equipped in all of the ODOT documentation that goes with that. We did a letter of interest, and we had 3 firms that were interested in this particular project. Again, we have selected American Structure Point to do this as well. For the reasons cited before, they're excellent at this ODOT LPA stuff. They have all of the documentation down. They gave us a proposal in the amount of $170,436 to complete the construction management scope of work. Construction is scheduled to really pick up in May. We anticipate probably 3 months of pretty heavy construction. Should be pretty much off-site, hopefully by September, with things fully restored and their new driveway and entrance to the hospital all set up and ready to go. So this was, again, a 2025 capital improvement item out of our 401 account. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Sean, you expect American Structure Point to have synergies between the two
Yes, we do.
projects?
Yeah.
So the top person on oversight probably going back and forth?
We found this works really well. This happened on Main Street in Oakland Court last year. They had floaters that would go back and forth. There's an economy of scale where you don't have to have somebody permanently staffed. It takes a little bit of effort on their end to make sure things are coordinated, but it works well.
Mr. Shaw, this intersection, why would it be a traffic light and why not a roundabout?
We actually had that conversation directly with Flower. So it was both in the traffic calming study. They actually recommended a roundabout. After we talked with their staff, they were not interested in it and cited ambulatory reasons. A lot of circular patterns with ambulances coming to and from. They had some issues with Toledo Hospital with the way some of those are working. So they're obviously a big partner in this. The reason the signal is there is for Flower. So we got to make sure our end user is comfortable with the product that we're providing. Both accomplish the goals. Traffic signal's perfectly fine here to do the job.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Shaw? Hearing none, ordinance number 9, 2025 for consideration. Mr. McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce by title only ordinance number 9-2025, accepting the proposal American Structure Point, Inc. to provide construction management services for the Haroon Road and Ravine Drive intersection improvement project, appropriating funds therefore in the amount not to exceed $170,436. I move passage of ordinance number 9-2025 as an emergency measure.
Second.
We've moved and seconded for ordinance number 9, 2025 to be passed as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carried and ordinance number 9, 2025 is passed as an emergency measure. Thank you very much. Number 17, Mr. Shaw, and I think this may be the last one for you, isn't it?
Hopefully you guys have had enough.
We're gonna have to give you a chair after a while.
Last one for me on the agenda tonight, Silvertown Drive, east side of town between Alexis and Monroe. This is one of our, we call them problem children in our department in terms of water mains. Behaves badly, breaks, located poorly, installed in 1965, more than served its time. Definitely needs to be retired and replaced. As you might recall, Silvertown was scheduled to be included in a resurfacing project that was sold last year. We pulled it because of the water main issues, decided to retool, make sure we had our water line investment properly done before we put brand new asphalt over the top. So our plans are completed for this. We're going to be replacing the 8-inch water line with the same size, 8-inch, with plastic that's in there. So at this time, we're requesting to proceed ahead with the advertisement of the project. Estimated cost is at $945,137. This was programmed in our budget for 2025. This project is funded entirely from our water account 701. So no capital 401 account numbers with this one. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Shaw? So we just have a request to authorize the clerk of council to go out for bids. Mr. McCann?
Yes, I move to authorize the city to be able to advertise for bids on the Silverton water line improvement resurfacing project.
Second.
A motion and a second to authorize the clerk of council to advertise for bids for the Silvertown Drive water line improvement and resurfacing project. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 18. Ordinance number 10, 2025. Chief Miller. tell us
Mr.
about
Mayor.
this.
What you have before you is a change that we're requesting in the staffing for the police department. The first part of this deals with the records clerks. We're approved for 2 records clerks and 1 supervisory clerk position. With the retirement of my secretary, we've moved, one of my clerks has decided to take that position, which has left a clerk position open. We have since offered a position to one of our dispatchers that left when we went through consolidation, so he'll be rejoining us January 21st. But my secretary is not retiring until the 31st. So we'll have about a 2-week overlap where we can do some training, get him on board about the same time that the other one will be moving into the secretary position. So this is only a temporary increase in personnel in that office, and it will end January 31st when we go back to 2 full-time police clerks and 1 supervisory clerk position. The other one is for the officer position, and we're asking to increase that by 2. We have been approached by the judge about adding security officers over to the court. We've had meetings with finance, with the service safety director and myself. We're in agreement that this is something we can do if we increase our staffing by 2, and we'd be providing them part-time 2 officers for security inside the courtrooms as needed, and then they would be at our disposal the rest of the time that they're not needed in court. So again, that would just increase the level from what we're approved at right now of 25 to 27.
So, Chief, could you describe to council what security has been historically at the courts, to give them some context, please?
Historically, they have hired retired officers, and they've been having trouble obtaining those. So they are currently hiring off-duty sheriff's deputies that are working through a temporary agency. So they're exceeding more costs, and they're getting a variety of people in at different times. So this way we're looking to stabilize it and put, standard officers in there. Our officers are familiar with how things work, so it could be a win for all of us.
And this was in the budget?
This was in the budget.
The court budget.
The court budget.
In the
I
court
was just
budget.
gonna ask that question, okay.
Would these officers, that would be their sole responsibility?
While they're at court, it would be their sole responsibility. If they're not needed at court, because again, it's only a part-time, then they would come back to different assignments with us.
Great.
They're expecting it to be about 75% in the court and then 25% back in the police department.
Thank you.
But there's some duties that our officers are doing right now with serving subpoenas that can be transferred back to them when they're not in court, which will free up our road officers.
Chief Miller, do you foresee any, concerns just being fully staffed, adding two more roles, or, just staffing in general?
Actually, our cadet just got word this afternoon that she passed the test, so
Oh, good.
that helps us there, and we're in the process of looking at hiring, which will help us replace the one that resigned in the fall to move to Florida. So we actually went since October, we've been down 2 officers. So yes, it's gonna help us.
I actually was meeting with Chief when she got that information, and that's the biggest smile I've seen on the chief in quite some time.
That replaces a position that has been vacant since August, September of '23. So.
Other questions for Chief Miller? Hearing none, we have ordinance number 10, 2025 for consideration. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to introduce by title only, ordinance number 10-2025, revising the administrative, departmental, and provisional organization of the city and the codified ordinances thereof by amending Sylvania Codified Ordinance, Chapter 125, Department of Public Safety. I move for passage of ordinance number 10-2025 as an emergency measure.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve ordinance number 10, 2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried, and ordinance number 10, 2025 is passed as an emergency measure. Thank you very much. We're on to resolution number 1, 2025. Ms. Briney, could you walk us through that briefly?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just an annual resolution that council considers every year to designate the clerk to take the public records training. So I would recommend its approval.
This is, as Ms. Briney indicated, this is something that I recall seeing for many years, and we certainly appreciate the clerk for doing that duty. But not to discourage anybody from council wanting to attend and refresh their memory in that regard, but certainly it's not something you have to do if the council considers and approves this. So we have resolution number 1. Yes, absolutely.
Do we know what the date is for this year, for this meeting? Has it been established?
Excuse me, I have not seen anything yet,
Okay.
Mrs. Westfall, but I'm sure have you seen anything?
Not for this year, but it's all online,
Oh,
and it can be taken at any time,
Okay.
once the window opens. So I can let you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Hearing none, we have resolution 1, 2025 for consideration. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce by title only, resolution number 1-2025, a resolution designating the clerk of council as the mayor and city council's designee to attend training programs and seminars about the public records law as required by Ohio Revised Code section 109.43. I move for passage of resolution number 1-2025 as an emergency measure.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 1, 2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried, and resolution 1, 2025 is passed as an emergency measure. Thank you very much. Now we're up to the committee reports. Earlier this evening, we had a Employee and Community Relations Committee meeting. It was held at, what was that, 6:45, Mrs. Westphal? At 6:45. If you could give us a brief report, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Employee and Community Relations Committee met today at 6:45. The members on that committee were all present. Myself, Ms. Westphal, Mr. Hanson, Mr. Hanem, and Mr. Richardson. And also joining us was Mary Morrison, who was interested in serving in the BZA position that we have open. So she shared with us a bio in advance, and then we just asked her a few questions. For the general information of our other council members who weren't there, Mary has been a Sylvania resident for 40 years, and she has been our appointee to the Charter Board. And she served as chair of the Charter Board for 2 years through their major transition, and I think everybody was very grateful for her leadership there. She additionally serves on 4 other community boards, and she seems very, very committed to our community. We felt very fortunate that she was interested in this BZA position. So after some discussion with her, Mr. Richardson moved that we advance legislation to this evening's meeting, appointing her to the BZA position that we have open. Mr. Hanem seconded that, and that motion passed. And then, seeing no other business to come before that committee, Mr. Hanson moved to adjourn, and Mr. Hanem seconded, and that motion passed, and the meeting was adjourned at 7:21.
Thank you very much.
I meant, sorry, at 6:51.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And as a result, there is a resolution that was passed out.
Correct.
Please.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce resolution number 2-2025, all members having received an advance copy by title only, appointing Mary Morrison to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term expiring December 31st, 2027. I move final passage of resolution number 2-2025 as an emergency measure.
Second.
Motion and a second for adopting resolution number 2025 as an emergency measure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. Resolution number 2025 is adopted as an emergency measure, and Ms. Morrison, we certainly appreciate your continued support. Thank you very much. If you happen to be watching this on video either now or later, you've been a wonderful partner for the city, and all the stuff that you've done, absolutely top-notch work with TARDA and board and so forth. So appreciate you stepping up and being willing to serve on the BZA. So thank you for that. With that, we have, do we have any committee referrals? I know we have a council item we have to deal with. Any committee referrals beyond that? Hearing none, Mrs. Westfall. Obviously, as you know, there's now a vacancy on council that needs to be dealt with and filled. Ms. Brining, what is the time frame for that? Refresh council's memory. They probably already know, but just in case.
That's okay. The council has 30 days to make the appointment. So the vacancy officially occurred on January 1st, so they have until January 30th to make that appointment.
So, Mrs. Westfall, have you considered how you want to proceed with this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have determined, and the process includes the deadline for the applications and people expressing interest is this Friday, January 10th at 12 noon. Then we would like to have a committee of the whole meeting. It's scheduled tonight and that would be a 7:30 a.m. meeting on January 14th, where we review the applications and make a decision about who moves forward. You know, we're not sure how many people will apply. If there's just a few, we would interview all of them, but if we have 10 or 20, we will need to narrow that field down. And so at that meeting on the 14th, we'll just kind of get a sense of who's applied and who we think should be moving forward to the interview process. And then we'll invite candidates to interview on January 16th at a 6 p.m. meeting, and that meeting will depend on what we learn at the 10th, but I anticipate that that meeting might be a little bit longer, depending on how many candidates are there. And then on January 21st, we would like to hold a meeting at 7 o'clock to make the final decision and make the appointment. And so with that, I'd like to move forward and make motions for those meetings, if that's acceptable.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'd like to move that we have a committee of the whole meeting on January 14th at 7:30 p.m. here in the council chambers to determine who will be invited to interview for the open council seat.
7:30 p.m. or
7:30 p.m. A.m. Did I say p.m.?
You said.
You did.
I think you said.
So sorry. 7:30 a.m.
7:30
Thank you.
a.m. on January 14th. Did I hear a second or not?
Second.
Okay, fair enough. We have a motion and a second to set committee of the whole meeting for the consideration of candidates for the open council position at 7:30 a.m. January 14th in these chambers. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And that's the first meeting set. Clerk will provide notice to the public.
And then the next meeting would be on Thursday, January 16th, and that would be an evening meeting at 6 p.m., and that would be to actually interview candidates who are invited to that interview process. And that would be held here in the council chambers as well. So I move that we have a committee of the whole meeting on Thursday, January 16th at 6 p.m. to interview candidates for the vacant seat.
Second.
Motion and a second to set a committee of the whole meeting for January 16th at 6 p.m. here in council chambers. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
And then I move that we set a committee of the whole meeting for Tuesday, January 21st at 7 p.m. to make the final decision for the vacant seat and make the appointment,
Also in chambers.
also in the chambers.
Also in the chambers.
That was a motion.
That's a motion. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second to set a committee of the whole meeting on January 21st at 7 p.m. prior to our council meeting for final decision on appointment through the open vacancy on city council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work on that. Look forward to adding the new council member in the next few weeks inside the month of January. So looking forward to meeting that individual and working with them. So, any other items that need to come before council this evening? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor of adjournment, signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much for coming, everyone.